Anyone? Hewlett Packard, we all know HP. The ideas. There were ideas people. They were bringing new products to market. That's where they made their greatest contribution, by thinking about the new technology and how it could actually be embedded. But all of the processes in actually getting it to market, they outsourced in the end. So again, it's understand what your core and non-core activities are. Core processes are those primary activities that have a high potential for competitive advantage. Non-core processes have low potential for competitive advantage and therefore strong candidates for outsourcing. So you are competing against each other. Last week I told you about the sharks. The sharks? Yeah? You don't have to swim faster than the shark. You have to swim faster than the guy that's next to you. Yeah? So understand this, but if the guy next to you has got, his core capability, it's difficult to use that analogy in all terms. But you have to understand what makes him swim faster. Is that one of the things, or whether you can give it away? And concentrate on the things that you do well. Do we want a break now? Okay. Let's take a break and we'll finish this one off in, can we say 10 minutes? Is 10 minutes enough? Okay. See you back here at 25 to 10. Remember, we've got a couple of, are those hands going up for questions? Oh, okay, just stretching. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. We've got 3 topics to cover today, so I'm For some reason, when it got to you guys, it wasn't the right one. They're not in total. Some of the previous assessment was still on the bits that you got. So the assignment said something about looking at your own organisation, and working out operations. That doesn't exist anymore. It shouldn't exist. It is simply about the Abu Dhabi nuclear reactor. That's where it starts. Look very carefully at the questions within the assignment. Now I have to say that whether it is undergraduate or at postgraduate level, when I mark assignments such as this, I really should have a stamp that's made up, one of those rubber stamps, because I keep writing the same thing. And it doesn't matter whether I'm doing it in Australia, in the UK, in South Africa, or in the UAE. The stamp should actually say, answer the question that's set. Answer the question that is set. This is one of the most important things that even postgraduate students such as yourself fall into the trap of wanting to set your own question. I give you an example. If your bosses said to you, I want A, B, and C, and you say, okay, I'll give them D, E, and F, and I'll do a really good job at D, E, and F. How do you think your bosses would actually like that?
Will not like that at all.
Well, it's the same with an assignment. You have to answer the question that's set. If we ask you for A, B, and C, we want you to answer A, B, and C, not a question that you've made up yourself. As I say, this has become commonplace in certainly in undergraduate and also in postgraduate work. That I write it so often that I might as well have the rubber stamp. Answer the question that's set. Answer the question. Answer the correct question. I put it in various forms. So read very carefully what that assignment says. From memory, it talks about a perception. It's about a nuclear reactor that is being built in the Middle East. Not just from the world's perspective of a nuclear reactor being built in Abu Dhabi or in the UAE, It's a nuclear reactor, a new nuclear reactor being built in the Middle East. There are going to be perceptions about that. Generally, throughout the world, we've had a poor perception of the safety, the security of nuclear reactors. I don't care where you lie with your belief in nuclear power. I'm ambivalent with nuclear power. I think under certain circumstances it can be very useful. I have my own opinion, but I'm not asking you for your opinions on nuclear reactors. I'm asking you from the perspective of what do you believe other people's perspectives will be, and how would you overcome these perspectives about using nuclear power in Abu Dhabi. So be very cautious about how you answer that particular question in your assignment. And that is why I've mentioned it right now. I was under the impression that you had all been sent out that revised copy. I know the original one that was sent out had my questions on it, but it had no scenario. It had left the scenario off, and it was I will make sure that before I leave today, that everybody gets those revised questions. The part that I'm actually, in fact, I'm going to find it right now. I'm going to find it and put it up. So at least you know what it is. This is where it should start. The UAE is currently in the process of building the country's first nuclear reactor facility to generate power, thus reducing demand on its natural oil resources. The facility will be part of a strategic energy initiative within this country, but might possibly attract criticism from other nations because of its geographic closeness to Iran, the recent tsunami-caused nuclear disaster in Japan, the Chernobyl incident, and what might be described as current general uneasiness about nuclear-generated power globally. And we would all agree that there are opponents against nuclear power. I give you an example. Australia, for example, has political policies in place that currently prevent these countries from engaging in any large-scale nuclear power generation. We have no nuclear power. We would prefer to use our own coal and generate lots of CO2 gases by using those coal-fired generation of electrical power. Even though Australia is a significant supplier of yellow cake. Yellow cake is one of the ingredients used in nuclear power generation. Questions are, what operations management issues that we have been discussed in Unit 305 do you believe should be taken into consideration in the construction and operation of this facility? The second part. How, for example, might the issues of quality assurance and product and process design, which we will be talking about and have started talking about, be used to alleviate such international concerns? It is about international concerns. It's how you would use the things that we were using in this particular course. The knowledge that you are learning in this particular course at an undergraduate level, then just tell me what you've learned. Basically, that's what your assessment would be. But at a postgraduate level, we go beyond that and we say, okay, now you have knowledge, so apply it. So now apply it. What are you going to do with that knowledge? And if I had to sum up the differences between undergraduate and postgraduate study, that is an enormous difference. But it really is a big difference, is it not? It's not just about learning about stuff, it's about applying stuff, of how to apply the knowledge that you've actually learned. I can actually take you into the theories behind it, and I can give you some examples from my background and examples around the world. but you eventually have to put it into some sort of an application for yourself. Say, how can I actually use this for benefiting my own company, or even for benefiting me? How can I actually do this? What can I do to actually apply these techniques? And in a general sense, in a generic sense, that is the difference between undergraduate and postgraduate work. Make no apologies for that. That's what you need to be able to do. I get so many, in normal universities, I get so many postgraduate students that come to me and expect to just do an extension of an undergraduate degree. And it doesn't work like that. At least it's not my intention that a postgraduate degree is simply another couple of courses added on to an undergraduate degree. It's a new way of thinking. It's a way of thinking that gives you value. And if we're talking about inputs and outputs here, and that transformation of adding value from that input to output, this is what we're talking about. You come in here without the knowledge, you go out with some more knowledge, which you're then able to apply for value for yourselves and for your organizations. So that's my philosophical talk. And I do apologize if this hasn't gone up already. There's two sort of small questions here. What operation policies must be set in place to ensure successful long-term operations of the UAE nuclear facility? And all of the things we actually talk about actually get involved into this. And there's one more question, but there's a question from here. Absolutely right. But the information that you do have is all in your notes, and I assume that everybody's got the notes.
But this relates to UAE. We don't have these topics.
And nor would I expect you to have that topic. But you need to apply it. One of the things that occurs within management is that you never get all of the knowledge to work with. You have to have your best, the best scenarios. And I don't want you to write about building a nuclear reactor. I want you to write about applying the techniques that we have talked about in Unit 305, Operations Management, in order to successfully suggest to management how it should be done.
Does this mean we cannot answer this one except in favor of the 305 first?
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And this is I mean, the whole purpose of doing a course. I mean, if I set one that didn't rely on the course itself, why would you want to do the course? So, you know, there are theories that we talk about, there are principles that we talk about in this course, which you then apply in a particular format. In this particular case, I haven't shown you how to do references, and I don't think anybody has actually shown you how to do this. I reference, and if you're going to use any of this, you need to make the same sort of references. Or if you find something yourself, then you reference in the appropriate manner. But in this sense, I don't want it to be a fully referenced. No, I don't want it. If you're going to reference, you're going to reference properly. But it doesn't have to be a reference heavy assignment. It is simply about using what you have learned here in a practical example. In a practical example. Yes. Yes. Okay. All of the things that we will have been talking about, there are 10 topics that are associated with this course. My suggestion would be to go through each of the topics and say, is this relevant to answering the question? You've got lots and lots of references within the 10, I don't know whether you've got all 10 yet, but there are 10 sets of slides that are out there. You say, is this relevant? Should I be thinking about this relating to a nuclear reactor? in Abu Dhabi and the perceptions of people about running that nuclear reactor. So don't look at Google as your first source of a call. Look at your notes as your first sort of call and go out from there. And then say, well, okay, what would I actually need to do? I can tell you, for example, in topic 10, which I recently finished, I make lots and lots of references to so what would you do to a nuclear reactor here? Topic 10 is on maintenance. Yes, maintenance. Now it's 2 weeks off yet, so or 2.5 weeks off yet. So I'm not going to give away too much of the story, but for a nuclear reactor, would you want a system, and it's a perfectly valid system in other production systems, where you can say, we will not replace items on this particular one until they break. That's a perfectly valid way. You maintain it, you don't maintain it until it breaks. When it breaks, you replace it. And do you want that sort of thing on a nuclear reactor?
No.
That's one of the things that you would have to say. We're going to have a maintenance program which makes sure that nothing breaks. As soon as something is even slightly thinking about getting warm, we will replace it. The level of maintenance, the level of quality that you need to put in, the processes, the training, all of these things we will talk about. We talk about the people. We talk about the processes. We talk, last week we talked about strategy. We talked about a corporate strategy. What is a corporate strategy? Have we got the corporate strategy right? Is it right that we should be trying to reduce our use of oil in this country because we are large users of electricity? Think in terms of this country and in countries around the Arabian Gulf of how, use the term green, how green we are, how much resources as individuals we actually use. You'll find that the UAE is in the top 5. In fact, 4 of the least green countries in the world are in the Arabian Gulf. The other one is Hong Kong, by the way. But there are certain reasons for that. There's certain geographic reasons, there's certain weather reasons. We have no water, which we need to generate for lots of electricity for desalination. The temperatures are hot. We want to make the place green. All of these things take a lot of power. And up to this time, we have been using oil. But oil just happens to be one of the major export resources that we have, or the major resource that we have. So should we be using that particular resource, or should we be looking at other ways? Look at Masdar. What is Masdar trying to do? Masdar City. See, there are lots of things that are aligned to having a strategy involving nuclear power. What else are we doing? And this is from an organizational strategy perspective, not operational. Week 1, we talked about linking those 3 strategies. Think about how you would do it. Not just operational. Don't think just operational. This one. Where I teach in Al Ain, we can see Jebel Hafid. Well, in fact, you can see Jebel Hafid from anywhere in Al Ain. Does everyone know Jebel Hafid? Jebel Hafid? Yes. So the question is, shouldn't we just put our nuclear waste in Jebel Hafid? Stable? Safe there with you? What do you think? No? You should see the people who live in Al Ain when they answer that. They didn't even wait 2 nanoseconds. Like they were. No, of course we don't. So there is an idea in Australia which we use the name, the acronym NIMBY. Has anybody heard of NIMBYs?
Limby ده بقى.
NIMBYs. NIMBY. N-I-M-B-Y. NIMBY. NIMBY. It stands for not in my backyard. Not in my backyard. You know, I want it. I want the nuclear power, but don't store the waste in my backyard. You're going to store it somewhere else. Not in my backyard. Understand this. This is the full assignment that you will be allowed to do. And it fits very nicely into our philosophy of a postgraduate course of actually being able to apply a lot of the techniques to a very topical subject at the moment. A very topical subject. But please don't send me instructions on how to build a nuclear reactor. I don't want to know that. The questions are not about how to build a nuclear reactor. It is about how to successfully use operations management techniques to successfully construct and operate, to alleviate people's concerns about nuclear reactors in general. But I'm sure that we will discuss this again.
How long the answers you're looking for? How many words you want per question?
Do you know, that's a good question. How long do you think it might take?
2 papers is nothing.
How long?
How long, sorry? How long it would take?
Out of, yeah, how long do you think it should be?
The answer?
Yeah,
Based on my knowledge, I may have one.
that's a good idea. That's a really good answer. It's based on whatever you want to put in. I'm sure if you write it, we'll read it.
But what you want from us? According to our knowledge, you can write only 1 or 2, but
Yeah,
what
you
you
can
want from
write
us,
what you
so
want.
after that you try to
Yeah.
research.
Maybe you'll get very, very enthusiastic about this and make a book out of it. Maybe you'll all become millionaires about writing. Just writing a book. But I understand your question, and I'm not trying to avoid it, I just don't know. But I will find out what is a general thing. I would have thought about 3,000-4,000 words. Is that too little? Remember, somebody's got to read it. I'll check. I will check. I will check, and I will get back to you with this particular one. You know, when people get into one of these assignments, it is more usual that people say, we can't complete it in our 3,000 words. Can we do more? That's what people normally say. And I will make sure, I will answer that question, and I'll also make sure that everybody gets this particular version. Yeah? It's not a slide, it's it was my original, the original assignment. I will make sure that it's sent to you. But I thought it was already sent. Well, it's more than useful, it is your assignment. It's what you should have got anyway. I don't have everybody's email address, but I will make sure that everybody gets that. Yeah. When we're talking about lean manufacturing, in World War II, the US system of mass production was the envy of the world. Materials were produced in large batches, leading to efficiency of scale. In the 1960s, Japan determined that they could not duplicate the US system because they did not have the raw materials. And they certainly didn't have the land that the US had got. So they developed systems that would allow them to produce in smaller batches. It gave rise to such things as the Toyota production system, or TPS, and just-in-time processes. And we talk about just-in-time processes this week, next week, and I think in the final week as well. You know the background of Japan. I may have mentioned last week that in the Second World War, when the Army of Occupation went into Japan, General MacArthur, who was in charge of the Army of Occupation in Japan, was so disappointed with the quality of the communication systems in Japan that he determined that he was going to make the quality in Japan better. And they didn't at that stage. The Japanese did not have a good quality system in place in manufacturing. So what he did is he knew that in the US, academia, there was a guy called Edward Deming. Edward Deming was an academic who concentrated on these new ideas in quality control, quality management. So he brought Deming over to the US, brought from the US to Japan. And he said, you talk to the Japanese manufacturers about quality. You tell them how quality works. The ironic part about it is the American manufacturers never listened to Deming. Deming, as far as they were concerned, was simply an academic. He didn't really have anything to contribute to American industry at that stage. But the Japanese loved Deming. They loved his ideas of quality, his ideas of what quality should be embedded within processes. And the Japanese became quality-minded because of an American who was actually brought in and taught them how to do that. The Japanese then turned the tables on America and went back and said, we know how to do this now. And it was not the Americans who turned to Deming for quality. It was the Americans had to come in because the shark was getting closer to the Americans rather than to the Japanese. The Japanese had swum ahead. In a global marketplace, Japan had become much more quality-minded than the US. So even though they had the opportunity to take the benefit or get the benefits of Deming's preachings on quality, they never took advantage of it. It was the Japanese that took advantage of Deming's philosophies of quality. And the US were forced to take note of this because of their competition, which then became the Japanese. The Japanese actually leapfrogged over the quality of the US. And they're still catching up. So these sorts of systems were Japanese oriented, and a lot of the quality writers themselves were in fact Japanese. When Nissan entered the UK production market, they provided a good example of lean production. And it was in flexibility, this broadening of everybody's responsibilities so that full use could be made of plant and equipment. These things were more easily done in Japan, that weren't unionized in the same way as the UK system and the US system. More so in the UK. It was a very unionized system. Not that I have anything generically against unions, but the unions prevented people from doing more than one job, and it allowed them less flexibility, allowed less organizations to have less flexibility. So it needed more people, and more people to do the same amount of jobs meant that it was more expensive. And inherently, that produced a more inefficient system. This total commitment to getting it right the first time. We talked in the next topic about quality. We said one of the fundamentals of modern quality management is prevention rather than inspection. You try to prevent errors from occurring within your production and operation systems rather than allowing them to occur and then fixing them up afterwards. And this was a philosophical change that the Japanese actually brought in. To say, okay, we're going to stop the poor production on the production line rather than fix it once they come off the production line. And this is a big philosophical change in quality. And again, it's about teamwork, of all pulling together. you know, that it's,
You know, they say it passes through 4 phases. I mean, one is the reactive,
yes,
proactive, to predictive, to preemptive.
yes,
Yes.
yes indeed. Yeah, you really need to, and the next topic actually talks more about those. But it's, again, it's a philosophy that was actually brought in, these ideas were actually brought in through the Japanese who implemented them first. But ironically, it was through an American who actually trained the Japanese in these techniques. But this teamwork of all pulling together for the same reason, or all going in the same direction, was really quite important. At the heart of re-engineering is this notion of discontinuous thinking. I've given you this example from Edward Ivana. I did it a little bit earlier. Rather than simply add to or revise an existing process, the idea is to think of it as a blank sheet of paper. I have a book here, which is now quite an old book. It's Michael Hammer and James Champy. Hammer and Champy's Re-Engineering the Corporation. There are some fantastic little case studies in there. There's one about Mazda and Ford, which makes some significant changes to the way in which Ford handled their accounts payable. There are some good examples in here about IBM Credit, who did things in a completely different manner. This book, when it came out, was really a revelation in how people actually change their operations practices. So it's old now, it's 20 odd years old, but the ideas still remain the same in here. And if I could get some copy of this, I would make sure that you've got it. At least the Mazda Ford example. I'll see if I can get a version of that and send it out. But it shows you how you can rethink your organizations. That was the Ford Mazda one. One of the things that I did in one of my contracting jobs, or consultancy jobs in Australia, as an example, there was an organization that distributed packaging materials for warehouses, for other warehouses. That's all they did. They were very successful. They had a very narrow market, but they did this particularly well. And because they were doing it well, it was very difficult to change the processes that they'd actually done. They were successful. And as I said, when you are very successful at something, you are less likely to want to change it. You don't want to change in radical changes such as this when you are doing things and you've already got a competitive advantage of your own. But this organization was bringing in stock from suppliers, and then storing it, and then sending it out to customers. And in some of those products, nothing was being done. It was coming in, they were taking it as in-feed, storing it, putting it on a truck and sending it out to a customer. They would do nothing while it was in there. And it's these types of ideas that you think, that's a candidate for re-engineering. If you're not actually doing anything with the product, why bring it in? Why bring it into your store? So one of the examples was that in this particular case, if you've got an information system and you trust your suppliers and you trust your customers, then rather than bring it in to your store, move it around a couple of times, and then send it out again, for no effective value add, why don't you just send it directly from your supplier to the end user, to the customer? Simple, is it not? You think about, do I really need to be handling that whole process? Does it need to come into my warehouse for me to do nothing to it and yet simply send it out again? Isn't it more effective to say, supplier, send it to the end user, I don't need to touch it? And that's what we did in this particular one. It was re-engineering or rethinking the way that you do things. You made much more profit and you had much less because you had much less costs involved in selling it. You didn't need to bring it in, a cost. You didn't need to store it, a cost. You didn't need to repack it, a cost. You need to send out, you didn't see it. All you saw was the money that came from that transaction. So, rather than simply add to or revise existing processes, the idea is to think of it as a blank sheet of paper. Although introducing new ERP systems was once seen as technological innovation in itself, the more modern view is that the technology is simply a catalyst. Do you know that word catalyst? It's a chemical term, which means that by itself it doesn't do anything, but it allows other things to work together. A catalyst has no effect until there are other things that are actually involved in that process. So the changing of the processes, not the technology itself, provides the real competitive advantages and the true benefits to the organization. So again, bring in the technology, it does nothing simply by itself. It may automate a couple of things, but it doesn't get any clear competitive advantage until it is used with a changing of the processes that allow you to do things through that new technology. A catalyst rather than a driver itself. Here's a slide. It's called break-even analysis. I told you at the beginning of this session that I didn't realize why it was brought in at this stage. I still don't. Here's a couple of equations. Stick them in a spreadsheet. Have some practices with them. So you can look at total cost, you can look at quantities. All these calculations can be performed manually. It's more efficient due to ever-changing circumstances for you to use a computer to calculate the answers. Simply by being able, in an Excel spreadsheet function, to put in the variables and just change those variables and everything gets recalculated. There you are. You can do this one on your own time. Just the cost of widgets. And you have to understand in an operations management perspective about where is your break-even point. When your sales have got down to a certain point, you say, well, okay, this is not economically viable to continue production when we've only got this. We need to be able to sell this amount to even break even. So we do this within a technology, in that technology topic. There's some references which I always put in the ends of each topic. So if you want to actually look up any more detail, apart from the stuff that you've got in your own books, these are the stuff that I've added to whatever's in the books already. All right. That is the technology part. And I'm going to go very quickly into this one. I know that we've been talking about quality throughout this. Whenever I talk about quality, I want to impress on you that quality is add in, not add on. It's not something that we do a whole heap of other things. We think about processes, we think about technology and whatever. Oh, and then at the end, what about quality? That's the philosophy of saying that's an add-on. Quality is never an add-on to what you're already doing. Quality should be added in to everything that you're doing. You need to be able to think quality in whatever you are doing within your organization, and certainly within an operations management perspective. So in this topic, we'll discuss the meaning of quality and explore the competitive implications of focusing on that philosophy of total quality management, or TQM. This should be a management philosophy. Requirements for improved quality of products and services have led to three important changes in international business over the past 2 decades. One, there is a growing recognition of the strategic importance of TQM, or total quality management. There's a major push by organizations globally to seek certifications to ISO 9000 quality standards. It's a nice little statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
unless you have got a philosophy behind going for the ISO 9000 tick, it's all a bit of a waste of time. I have worked for organizations in my life that have simply been interested in the tick of the ISO 9000 quality. They're not interested in what the tick actually represents, that is quality within the processes and products that they actually produce. They're interested only in the tick. My PhD supervisor, Alan Underwood, Professor Alan Underwood, wrote about critical systems. He would have been very good to ask about nuclear power stations. His whole PhD was on critical systems. He said, as far as quality is concerned, that it would be possible, theoretically possible, to get an ISO 9000 tick for a company that was making life jackets, you know, the life jackets when you go out into the ocean, that were actually made out of concrete. You got that idea? Life jacket made out of concrete? Theoretically, it would be possible to get an ISO 9001 concrete life jacket tick. Anybody want to buy a concrete life jacket? So it is not the product itself or how useful the product is, but there is a process by which you could get the ISO 9000 certification. A concrete life jacket is not going to be a very useful product, I would suggest, unless you had specific reasons for using it. So again, the seeking of the certification has certainly become globally acceptable and globally sought after, but it's how you go about it. Don't go for the tick, go for what is behind the tick of ISO 9000. And that's what I would discuss. Then there is this growing recognition and application of awards. The American Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, the Australian AQA, the Australian Quality Award, and the Europeans have one as well. All of slightly different values. So quality is one of the objectives of operations and one of 4 decision-making responsibilities, and we will discuss the other 3 in operations management throughout this course. So quality is defined here as meeting or exceeding customer requirements now and in the future. Meeting or exceeding customer requirements now and in the future. Quality is about providing excellence in the products or services that an organization produces. And it is not simply about whether somebody can produce a product to meet customer expectations now, and the next time they come in and they get a completely different experience. It's about continuous quality. There have been many occasions, I dread to say this, in Dubai, where I have gone to an organization and I've got absolutely brilliant service. And I think, wow, quality assurance, wonderful, I'm going to go back. And I go back to be very disappointed. Because it's not continuous quality. You can go quality up to a point, and then the next time you come in, it's not that same level of quality. Have we all experienced this? It is unfortunate, but quality is about continuing quality in performance in how you have actually delivered your goods. Anybody work for Al Nabuda before I start begging? Maybe. That's good enough for me to finish. Sorry. Well, you know, a lot of people get caught up in the process itself of going for the tick. And that's what I was talking about. If you concentrate too much I'm getting the tick, you seem to forget about what is involved in getting the tick. Do you understand what the concept? We're getting far too caught up in the tick itself.
Don't leave it. We will use it there.
It's continuous improvement, yes.
Can be.
Yes. Absolutely. And I like that term, robotic. It just follows what people have been doing in the past. One of the pillars of quality is continuous improvement. You've got to be able, Kaizen, the word Kaizen is about, regardless of how well you think you are doing something, you always know there's a better way of doing it. You know there's a better way. So you're not sitting comfortable and complacent with the way that you are doing things at the moment. Therefore, you're not looking for other ways of doing it. Yes. Yeah.